Also, what video is this? Whose channel is taking this video?
Oh, I assumed it was yours.
I assumed it was yours.
Oh.
I already have like 4 different Pinocchio-based stories on mine, so I figured I could give one to you.
Yeah, I'm fine with it being on your channel, and maybe since you've covered Pinocchio, because I've never covered that one, so maybe it'll make more sense for your channel.
I feel like the expert right now, but
Yeah.
I feel like I already gave a reputation that I'm just a guy who's just making a lot of Pinocchio videos. I especially love how like he framed it all, Stanley Kubrick, at least in the original draft, like he framed it all to be like just Pinocchio. He would never refer to it as AI. He would always just call it Pinocchio. And just seeing the certain elements like the Flesh Fair, you could relate it to like the circus or Stromboli's theater. The Rouge City, that's like an homage to like Pleasure Island. I found it interesting that he just saw this and just like, I could just work around, take all the elements and just put it all together. It's just my futuristic Pinocchio. Especially at the end with eventually finding the Blue Fairy and just sitting there for how long? Like 2,000 years?
Yeah. What did you think of the addition of Jude Law's character?
Gigolo Joe? I didn't hate it. I didn't like it. I don't know what else it added to it, just to help him along the way. It just felt like he was just carrying another robot along with him, just going on this adventure.
Yeah, and I haven't read Pinocchio or seen the movies in a long time, but does Pinocchio have any kind of equivalent of someone who helps him in his journey? Is that what inspired them to add that character?
In the original story, it's just him, but it is like on brand for Pinocchio to just meet up with other characters every now and then.
I said let go. I'm trying.
Don't let go. Keep me safe. Don't let go.
Put yourself.
Jude Law's like just performance in that movie was pretty memorable, especially by the way he moved. He said he got inspired by a couple of old actors back in the day, especially like the way they moved, like the way they jiggled or the way they walked.
Yeah.
It's so fun seeing these like movies of the past and then just recognizing actors you know so well now. I noticed, what's his name, Brendan Gleeson. I think he was the owner or the promoter of the Flesh Fair. And it was just so cool because now he's widely recognized, mainly popular for Mad-Eye Moody in the Harry Potter series. It was also surprising but also sweet to hear like Robin Williams' voice in this again.
Yeah.
As soon as he appeared, I was like, oh, my heart.
And it was such a perfect moment too for him to be narrating that part.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is funny thinking like Google, I feel like Google existed in 2001, but obviously it isn't what it is today. But their Dr. No, it was such a bad way to search things. Like Google works so much better. But yeah, it was just kind of funny how they imagined, first of all, they make you have to pay, whereas these days, you know, you can just go for free on Google.
Question me, you pay the fee. 2 for 5, you get 1 free.
And also, just surprising, I forgot that Chris Rock was in this movie. That was just so random.
I don't know if he has a connection to Steven Spielberg, like were they just like, yeah, it'd be fun if you just did 5 seconds of voice, right? Because it's just that
just come in so we could kill you through a cannon. Originally, it was supposed to be on Jerry Seinfeld that they got first.
That would have been funny too.
I was watching back. I forgot the name of the brother that comes back in David's life, or the Swinton family.
Yeah, Martin.
He has such a familiar face, but for the life of me, I could not remember until today, where I had to come back and remind myself of the movie. And then I see his face again. I was like, all right, I gotta look him up. And then I realized he's the kid brother from Lizzie McGuire. And it was just like, oh, that's why his face looked familiar. What was? Do you remember what his issue was?
I don't think they ever said. I don't know if he was in an accident. He was in some kind of coma or something, and it seems like they didn't think he was gonna come back. But he's wearing those leg braces, so it made me think it was some kind of accident.
Between the 3 like short stories that follow, it kind of told a story specifically about the mother. In the first story, during the summertime, like the mother just had this David and Teddy pushed on her at the beginning, and near the end of that first story, like she gets a call, she got the chance to have a natural child. And then the second story, I guess there was a time jump, because by then it feels like the child that she had passed away or something, and now she just has this bitter like resentment against David and Teddy. She's depressed. Now she feels completely lonely, especially since she was robbed of her child, which kind of sucks, especially like in that world where you only get like one or like very specific chances to have that. So to just lose that right away, it really sucks.
I can't accept this! There is no substitute for your own child!
You don't have to.
They really changed the way how they handled the whole population of both societies. Like in the beginning of the movie, you know, apparently global warming has taken over. People need these robots as replacements. Whereas in the short story, like it just seems more corporate. It's like a business. It doesn't actually have a narrative. It's just focused on this like dystopian future. Like even the dad surprised me as well. The dad, Henry Swinton, had a much more prominent role in the short story. Like he was actually more active in like the corporation where David was made, whereas in the movie the dad is just a dad. He's just a consumer.
Yeah, and it was funny because in the movie, like he works at the company, right? And so that's why he's able to get David. He's the one that encouraged his wife that they should keep David, but then he was the one who quickly kind of turned on David too. So that was
made me so mad.
Yeah.
I was like, you pushed this on her, and then later you can't get mad for that. What do you mean? It was your idea in the first place.
If he was created to love, then it's reasonable to assume he knows how to hate.
The imprinting scene in the movie, how you have to imprint David so that he'll love you. I thought that was a really great scene in the movie, and it was very touching. That was kind of funny too, though, like how so people buy these android children, but it can only imprint on one parent. So like one parent it's gonna love and the other one it won't care about. So I feel like that was kind of a...
Wait, is that really what it was? Like just one parent?
Yeah, because the wife is the only one that imprints on him, and so the mom is the one he loves. And so I guess that's also maybe why the dad wasn't as connected to him, is because he didn't love the dad in the same way, because it's only possible to love one person.
And it also kind of relates to the short story as well, like just that connection, because the dad is barely even in the relationship between David and the mom. At least in the short story, he's always way on business. He's always just trying to make those deals or whatever. At one point, he tried to convince people to like buy Mars and just put androids on that planet as well, which was pretty weird. All the success he's built up in all these true stories just kind of just goes down the drain, and then eventually he goes ending up and finding David again, and that connects back to like the scene near the very end where, you know, David realizes, you know, he's not one of a kind. There's so many Davids around him that he finally gets the realization that, you know, he's a product manufactured to be this way.
David, do you have any idea what a success story you've become?
In a way, it really is tragic. He had a program, an imprint program inside him for like the rest of his days. That was his only goal. He wanted to just come back home. He wanted to return to his mom. He wanted to gain her love, especially like during the scene with all the Davids that he finds. The first one where he's really just super jealous and just really just wants to be the only one, because he knows like if he's the only one that deserves her love. And to me, that just feels so sad.
And it's interesting because I never really considered it until you were just saying how like he's programmed to love her, and no matter what happens he's gonna love her, and that's his top priority. And how if he were human, it's still complicated, but if you're a human you can kind of try to like accept the situation you're in, and you can try to forget about the person, or you can try to move on in some way or another. But with him he can't, because that's what he's programmed to do, and so there is no trying to move on with his life, right?
After I find the blue fairy, then I can go home. Mommy will love a real boy.
In the movie, like you said, the mom is much more likable, but then we also see her journey with David, like you just said, how initially she was like, what, like we can't do this, and we see her come around to it, and eventually she has some kind of a love for David, right? And at the beginning of the movie they're saying like, yeah, you can program robots to love humans, but how do you know a human is gonna love a robot? And then also in the beginning, how the mom sees that David has been writing letters to him, writing letters to her, like saying how he loves her. And then we got that in the movie as well, but in the movie, you know, it was a more emotional scene because it's right before she's about to go tell him he can't be around anymore, and that's when she comes across these letters. But yeah, I do think it is an interesting theme, like the desire to be human, right? And to, you know, he might have human emotions, but technically technically he's not human. And so just that internal battle we get in movies and stories like this, I always do find really interesting.
Why don't you look like one? You're not cute like a doll. You just look like someone's ordinary kid.
The way the flesh fair scene ends, I thought it was pretty amazing, because it really does proves Professor Hobby's like genius, that he actually created a boy so lifelike that even when they're telling them, oh, this is not really a real boy, he's just an android, like just looking at it, they still don't believe it. That like realness, or just like, I guess fake realness, like saved them in the end.
It's real, but it's not like fake realness, because in that scene he's like begging, being like, oh, like save me, like don't hurt me, whatever. And the lady is like, androids, like they don't beg for their life, like he must be real, or you know, it tugs at their heartstrings basically.
It was also interesting, like in the movie, like everything was pretty organic, but it was weird how in the story everything was synthetic, like nothing was really real, including the house they were living in. I think in the second story, after David was like taking Teddy apart, pretty much killed him essentially, and he just figured out that he was made of the same robotic like internal organs that he had, and then he goes ballistic and pretty much he's destroying the house and just tearing it apart. Not really tearing it apart, but just the illusion of a house that was there. Like it's all virtual, it's all holographic. Nothing in this story was real, except in the movie where everything he wants to go after, like he has real motives, he has real like goals. It's like more organic in a sense. It kind of added to this whole thematic of what's real or what's not.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, the bear in the movie, he was so cute. But it was interesting.
He was adorable.
Yeah.
Mommy.
Yeah, I think this movie just did a really good job at like questioning like what's human and what's not. Like, is it the whole flesh fair scene, which I'm assuming this is kind of what they were going for, is how these people are cheering at these androids being killed in these horrible ways. And some of the androids do look clearly like robots, but some of them look very human too. So it's like that has to be like desensitizing people towards just any kind of violence, right? Like even though they're android, they look so human that I feel like it would be a more desensitized world in some ways.
This is a very thought-provoking film.
Yeah.
That just opens up a lot of questions that just there's so many you could pick from it. Like even just immortality, like is it right to create androids, especially like child androids? It's like that one scene from like Jurassic Park. It was like, yeah, we have the technology to do it, but should we do it? Like it's just gonna lead to a lot of problems in the road.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
And have you covered Blade Runner on your channel?
No, not yet.
Yeah, definitely certain aspects of this made me think of that. You know, both deal with like androids, of course.
Yes.
But then in the end, when David is able to meet the guy who created David, that was just giving me Blade Runner vibes with the movie specifically. And what did you think of the ending when, so they bring his mom back for one day, and so the one day they have just the perfect day in David's eyes. And then she goes to sleep, and they know that when she goes to sleep, she won't wake up. And so it's like, oh, and then David went to sleep too, even though technically he can't. So did he can't die, I guess.
No, he can't. I think he's just resting there
Yeah.
forever. A fun detail I found, they were working, especially Stanley Kubrick, who was opposed to the idea of like hiring a child actor. Like I think during the process he really wanted to try and create a child robot to try and, you know, go through this movie. They eventually did it, but apparently it was a complete failure. It did not look appealing at all.
That seems like it would be creepy.
It sounded creepy. I was like, no way you can, you can go along with this. So eventually, like, they decided to do with the child actors. And I was wondering why he felt so robotic throughout this movie. And it was so simple. Like, throughout the entire movie until the very end, he doesn't blink. Not once while he's on camera. Which makes it like pretty unsettling for the most part, but it does make it believable.
Yeah, he was so good. Which I always think of him with this and The Sixth Sense as being, you know, two iconic roles of his. And so it is interesting that he just hasn't really done as much as an adult. I've never really looked into him, like why he stopped acting, because yeah, he was so impressive, and he was what, like 11 or 12 in this movie. And also like the part like I was talking about with the imprinting scene, like the way he's able, his expression changes going from just like feeling neutral about her to suddenly loving her. So yeah, great acting.
Now make a wish.
It came true already.
Those three stories, they were more focused on like the world that they were in. There was never really a narrative. It was just showing off like, oh, this is the world we're gonna tell this short story about. So I do like how the movie found ways to just pluck bits and pieces of that short story to put together like this huge narrative of just a kid, an android kid trying to find his mom. He gave it the Spielberg touch.
Yeah.
As Kubrick wanted.
Yeah. I read that, so like Stanley Kubrick originally was the one who was working on this movie, which I hadn't remembered. And so a lot of people are like, oh, that explains, you know, some of the darker moments of the story. But then I read that Steven Spielberg claims that Kubrick mostly did like the beginning and the end. And so some of the darker moments in the middle, and including Jude Law's character, I read that that was all Steven Spielberg, and that was his addition, which was interesting. I haven't seen a ton of Kubrick movies, but to have him tell like a heartwarming story just didn't seem like his usual. That's not what I associate him with.
This was a project that he knew like Spielberg would want to take. I don't know, they were back and forth on this project up until like Stanley Kubrick's death, where his wife had to actually push it on Spielberg to say, you know, either you make this or it'll never get made. It's so interesting, like the real stories behind like the production or how even these things get made, they're always so interesting to me.
And I said yes. First, because it was a wonderful story, and second, because it was a way for me to honor Stanley.
I would say this is loosely based on the short story because there's not much to compare.
I do think it's interesting when the story a movie is based on, when it's either a short story or there's just not too much to work with, because usually, you know, like there's more to the book than the movie. And so I just always find it interesting when it's the opposite, where the movie took like the bones of a story and they turned it into something more. But yeah, that's definitely what we get here.
He went to that place where dreams are born.
As I'm talking about it right now, I'm trying to figure it out how I'm going to edit this video. It'll probably be just end up being a compilation. Yeah, I guess this is the end of the video. If you want to take a second to plug yourself.
Yeah, so Why the Book Wins is my YouTube channel where I also do book versus movie comparisons. So yeah, you guys should check that out.